Hi, I'm Jennifer, here with another Machine Minute brought to you by Baby Lock and the Crescendo Machine. Now I'm going to tell you something that might sound a little controversial. I love binding. That's right, I love binding. It's my favorite part of the quilt making process. Maybe it's because I get to hold that finished quilt at the end, but I really do enjoy it. So let me show you the trick to turning corners when it comes to putting your binding on by machine. I like this method because I don't have to cut any of my binding on the bias. I can make the most of my fabric, cut it on the straight of grain. I have no curves. I'm not trying to bend it around the corners and make them come out square. This method will work every time, and it really is simple. Let me show you how. Now I've prepared my binding. I've folded it in half. It's a double fold binding, and I've got it placed against the quilt top. I like to sew with the 1/4 inch foot in place because I want a 1/4 inch of the binding to show on my quilt top when I finished with it. So I start a couple inches in from my binding, and I just sew along the edge. Now I like to begin my binding on the side of my quilt rather than the top or bottom, and I try to never put it in the middle. I think it's less noticeable where it joins together if you set it off from the middle or the center where your eye often goes when you're looking at a quilt. So I'll come to the corner and I'm going to stop a 1/4 inch from the edge. And when I do, I'll put my needle up and my presser foot up, and then I'll pull the quilt out from under the needle. Now this is where some people get a little nervous because I have my threads still attached. I haven't cut them, but I'm going to make that mitered corner. And the way I do that is first turning the quilt so it's parallel to the needle. This is the edge I'm going to sew on next. I take my binding and I flip it up. And here, when I flip it up, I want the binding edge and my quilt edge to be the same, just one long straight edge. So once I get it folded up so that that edge is all the same, I'll finger press a crease right there. And then I take my binding and fold it back down, holding that finger press in place with my left hand. And here, when I fold it down, I just want the creased edge here to be parallel to this side. So when I fold that down in place and just hold it with my fingers, what I've really got is like a little triangle of fabric right there at the corner. You hold it down, and I'm going to go back under the needle, and I just push those threads out of the way, and I'm going to start sewing again right on the edge, put my presser foot down, my needle down, and begin sewing again. Let me show you again as we get to this next corner. I'm going to sew all the way up until I'm about a 1/4 inch away from the edge. Raise my needle and raise my presser foot. Turn the quilt so that the next edge I'm going to sew the binding on is parallel to the needle. Then I'll take my binding strip and fold it up. Here's the part again where I'm going to make a finger pressed crease, and you can see that the line goes straight here from the binding to the quilt edge. It's all straight. That's how I'm going to get a nice miter when I turn it back. So I finger press that diagonal there, then I hold it with my left hand and bring it back down with my right. Here I'm aligning these edges, and at the top edge where the crease is in the binding or the fold, I just want to make sure that's parallel with this top edge. So again, what I have then is a little triangle that is formed by how I folded the binding up. And by taking that strip up, finger pressing it and folding it back down, that's how I create that little extra fabric. So I'm ready then to again slide it back under the needle. I'll just keep those threads out of the way. I haven't cut them. And again, I'll lower my presser foot, lower my needle, and I'm ready to begin sewing down that edge. So when you're ready to turn your binding, what you'll do then is you'll have that little triangle of fabric there. You simply fold back or turn back the one side of your binding, and you have a nice 1/4 inch binding. And right here you can see you have that little miter, and that's caused by the way that you flipped up the binding and folded it back down. And so what you'll end up with when you turn that back is a beautifully mitered corner on the front of your work, right there. And it's nice and square. And on the back side of your work, you'll also end up with a nice miter where things will match up. So it's a great way to get nice sharp corners on your quilt without having to cut bias binding. I hope seeing this binding corner technique in action has given you the impetus to try it yourself. I'm confident you'll have nice mitered corners in no time.